joining me this morning. Michael Stirling, he was originally arrested quite early on in the original investigation and then released on bail. How quickly did he become a person of interest?
He was a person of interest from the start, hence his arrest. Some of the difficulties around why he was released that first time is because we had issues in proving had harm come to Samantha, or was Samantha actually in company with him and didn't want to be found. So he was a person of interest from the start. He had to be released due to evidential reasons, and hence why the investigation continued. And as a result of finding Samantha's body, we were able to quickly arrest him, and then he was subsequently charged with the murder.
An alarm was raised quite early on into her disappearance. Had colleagues at the Royal Stoke, again, this is going off a lot of speculation that was around at the time, but the hospital would never confirm this. Had she warned colleagues that she feared that Michael might do something to her? Was she in fear leading up to, obviously, the events that occurred?
We have no evidence to suggest that Samantha disclosed that Michael was a risk to her in any way. I know it's been talked about in the press by other journalists, but we have no witness that has come forward and brought that to our attention, and we have interviewed all of Samantha's colleagues at hospital. The relationship was hidden. There was one or two people that she had confided in about the relationship and alluded to it, but it was hidden in the main from general knowledge.
Okay. What can you tell us about the crime itself, the way it was carried out, and the subsequent attempt to cover it up? Because I remember when I was speaking to your colleague Simon in the initial round of appeals, the information that was put forward by yourselves, it just seemed like she'd vanished. Her car was on the drive, her bank cards were at home.
Yeah, it was a major investigation for the force, no doubt about that. The circumstances of how Samantha went missing on day one were quite clearly different to other missing person inquiries that we deal with, which is what raised the alarm and caused us to treat it with such seriousness. It was a huge investigation for the force. It took a lot of resource, a lot of time, and investigation to take place to trace what had happened to Samantha and identify what had happened to Samantha. But ultimately, it was resolved with satisfaction at the end for us. Main issues with this investigation were clearly about what had happened to her and where was she. I've already alluded to earlier that we were unsure about whether Samantha was still alive, had she come to harm, and that was down to what evidence we could have recovered at an early stage. But through investigation around the use of her phone following her death, we now know, through investigation around where his movements were in that week after his initial arrest, led us to finding a body and then him subsequently being charged with murder.
And the phone that you just mentioned there, is that what led your investigation to Caverswall, or did you receive a tip-off? I've been out there. I didn't go out there at the time because I couldn't, but I have been out there since, and it's a very, very remote part of the Staffordshire countryside.
It is very remote, which is partly helpful to us in the way that it points us to an area of interest as to why somebody would be there in the middle of the night. But in answer to your question, there are two sources that took us there to that area to help us aid in finding Samantha's body. The first one was being his phone was in that area on Friday night. We now know that at that time his phone was there, he was burying her body. And secondly, through police observations, we were able to find him there on Thursday. I think it was Wednesday, the Thursday of the week leading up to the finding of a body. He was there and seen in suspicious circumstances around the countryside. We were then able to set what is called a search strategy, and her body was found quite quickly thereafter. So there were two sources that took us to that area and made it an area of interest, if you like.
You say on the Thursday, so was that the Thursday after he was released on bail?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
So does one infer from that he hadn't buried the body immediately?
We now know he buried the body on Friday night at 10:30 p.m. Well, between 10:30 p.m. and 11:15 is when we will say, and he is accepted at court, is when he was burying the body at Caverswall at the location where she was found of Tick Hill Lane. So the Thursday incident is thereafter that, it's 6 days later. Yeah.
Right, where he returned to the area.
He returned to the area, that's right. Yeah, my theory behind it is that he needed to make sure that we hadn't found Samantha's body, and he wanted to confirm that she was still there and hidden. That is a theory, of course, that we're working on. But, of course, by taking him into that area, his subsequent behaviour when we saw him in that area led me as the SAO to be able to say, well, that area is now of interest. Is it the phone that's hidden, and we've always known Samantha's phone's outstanding, or is it indeed her body?
It's a large area of land around the quarry site. How easy was it on that Saturday to come across it? Was it literally a needle in a haystack, or from your tracking, were you able to sort of box it in and get to it relatively efficiently?
No, it wasn't simple like that at all. It's really difficult. Ultimately, a strategy was set with our search advisors, which looked at key areas about where the phone was, where he was seen. An area of a radius area was set of 1,000 metres, and some applied science was then placed into within that 1,000 metre radius where are the priority areas to start searching. I think there were 9 in total, and Samantha's body was found at priority area 2. So that is down, it's been completed with applied methodology and science as to what those priority areas are, but quite quickly we found a body as a result. So it isn't just a needle in a haystack where we'll just start, searching over there or wherever. It has got some methodology behind it, and that methodology worked in these circumstances very well indeed.
Can you tell us anything regarding the other 2 men who were arrested while the investigation was active? Again, there was a lot of speculation around the 2 gentlemen that were arrested at the time, and then I believe have been released without any further charge or investigation. Was there any suggestion that they might have had a hand in helping Michael dispose of Samantha's body, or that they may have known that this is what Michael had done, i.e. he had confided in them?
Yeah, I can confirm, as you've stated, there were 2 men arrested for what we will say was a suspicion of assisting an offender. There is no evidence to say that those men were assisting Michael Stirling in any way. If there had been, of course, we would be charging and prosecuting them. So there is no evidence to say that they assist him in killing, disposing, or whatever. So they were released from their bail requirements, and so there's no further action being taken against either of those men.
Did either of them assist you in any way in the investigation in terms of conclusively narrowing it down to Michael, or were they just part of the investigation and then obviously...
But they were both part of the investigation and helped us as much as they possibly could, which is why we were able to rule out their involvement.
Okay. In the original arrest, and certainly during a subsequent arrest after Samantha's body was found, did Michael show any emotion during questioning? What was his general demeanour during the lead up to charges being put to him? He seemed very stony-faced and emotionless during the court appearances that I've witnessed, and I know 1 or 2 of my colleagues have sort of shared that view, but obviously you spent more time with him than any officer will ever do.
Yeah, of course. He answered very few questions to us, which is his right. He doesn't have to. On his initial arrest, he provided us a prepared statement that loosely said he was nothing to do with her disappearance. On his second arrest, had nothing to say. And throughout that time in custody, I've not seen 1 ounce of remorse from him. And I would say the same through the court processes. We have not seen a remorseful man. We've seen somebody who is quite thoughtful and considered in what he's doing. In terms of my opinion of him as a result of what he's done, I would say he is cruel, callous and arrogant. I say cruel because of the deceit that he spun in terms of trying to hide the fact that he had killed Samantha on the Friday night and sending messages to Samantha's sister that tend to suggest she was still alive and okay. Now that is cruel than most things I can think about. The callous way that he's disposed of a body in terms of wrapping it in a duvet cover and burying it and just leaving it at the side of the road like a dead animal. And then of course the arrogance to think that he would actually get away with this, and ultimately the evidence he left and trail he left, he was never going to get away with this. So he clearly thought he was going to be clever in the police in terms of hiding what he had done. So that is my view of Michael Stirling.
In the plea hearing, his QC put forward that it wasn't premeditated. How do you react to that on the evidence that you've got? I mean, he's pleaded guilty now.
Yes.
But from what you're telling me, the picture that you've built up, do you disagree with that statement?
No, that statement is factually correct. If I had evidence of premeditation, that evidence would be put forward to the court and would be taken into consideration at the point of him being sentenced. I had a theory it could have been premeditated, but evidence hasn't been established to prove that.
Okay. So you don't think he's got any regrets? He's never shown what you would consider any ounce of genuine remorse for what he's done?
No, I have not seen any sign of remorse for what he's done. I know there's been comments in press previously at the last hearing of him breaking down in tears. I personally didn't see that, so I would say I've seen no signs of remorse from Michael Stirling for what he's done.
Overall, how difficult has the investigation been for yourself, for your fellow officers?
Hugely difficult. I'm keen to not make this about how difficult it was upon the police force, but it was difficult. Long hours were completed every day from Samantha's disappearance, not just from my investigative team, but from other departments across the force, search teams, officers protecting scenes, forensic officers, surveillance officers, that kind of thing. So it was hugely difficult. Obviously, it had the national attention from the press, who were hungry to know the information, so we had to deal with that. There's the emotional side. We all wanted to find Samantha. Everybody was pulling together to find Samantha with the hope that she was still alive. And sadly, when we found her on the Saturday and she wasn't, it had a huge impact on people emotionally, not just the family, but of course people that had to deal with extracting Samantha's body and the like. So it was very difficult and impactful for us. And I just hope that today's sentencing goes away to provide some resolve to the family, but certainly we've achieved what we need to achieve from a professional point of view.
I mean, it did become a very big national case. I mean, murder, unfortunately, is something that does happen in our society. I'm sure far too regularly for some people. Why do you think this case particularly captured the national imagination, for want of a better word?
I would say I think this has captured the national attention because of who Samantha was. She wasn't a girl who leads a chaotic life. She was an upstanding member of the community. She was loved by colleagues and her family. To have somebody who delivers so much life through being a midwife to then being killed and disposed of in such a way is just tragic. And I think that's caught the attention of everybody. It was just so out of character for her to go missing as well. So I think that was probably the main reason that it's caused so much attention. It's the emotional side.
The family and yourselves must have been both relieved that it hasn't gone to trial.
Yes. Without doubt, without having to put the family through a trial is significant. If Michael Stirling is to be given any credit, then that's some credit he can be given. They haven't have to be put through that, but certainly having to get through Christmas and deal with it at the start of next year. So they are pleased as they can be, but obviously still feel quite angry towards Michael Stirling and his actions that he's carried out. Despite
the evidence, on that day, did you expect him to plead guilty? Because the overall feeling was, from his previous court appearances and his demeanour, was that this was a man that looked like he was just going to fight it through to the end. And I can remember the reaction in the press gallery when he pled guilty. But there were a lot of pauses during that day. What do you know if it was a last-minute thing? Was he going to plead not guilty?
I think you're not far away from the actually reading into what you saw happened at the two court appearances at Northampton. The evidence was overwhelming against Michael Stirling. It is not usual to have a defendant for murder plead guilty at such an early stage. However, having knowledge of what the evidence was that he was facing at that point, I am not surprised that he pleaded guilty, and think it was probably the right thing for him to do. But yes, was it a last-minute thing? Possibly so, but it certainly, in terms of it, I think he needed to see the evidence that was there, understand it with his defence team before making that decision.
How are Samantha's family? Have they had the closure that they now need? Obviously, nothing will ever replace Samantha.
Samantha's family are doing well. Certainly Carol, Samantha's mother, and Gemma's sister have received support from our family liaison trained officers. We have contact with them regularly and work with them regularly. It's been difficult, as you'd expect. It's something that they've got to deal with and got to deal with for the rest of their lives. They feel very angry towards Michael Stirling. There's perhaps a degree of lack of understanding about why he's done this, and we are in his hands as to why he's done this. And I'm hoping that today we'll give them some sort of degree of answers as to why and what happened. But yes, there is closure now as to now they know why and who killed Samantha, and it will just be a case of dealing with things in the future and trying to be as best they can be to get used to the idea of Samantha not being in their lives anymore, which is very sad for them. Very sad. And
finally, your reaction to today's sentencing?
Yeah, I'm pleased. Obviously, I'm pleased. I'm pleased in the speed that we've been able to resolve this matter, to get Michael Stirling in front of a court, to get him sentenced to life. So yeah, there's nothing more to say that I am pleased. It just provides resolve for everybody involved.
Okay.